So, hello to all of you. Thank you for being present at this roundtable. That is very promising, and it's on this theme, how to improve drug assessment. I thank already those who are going to participate to this panel. Christelle, you work at the National Agency for Drugs. Christophe, CEO of Bristol Myers Squibb. Thierry Hulot, President of Merck France, of the LEEM, and Lionel Collet, President of the High Health Authority in France. So allow me to open this roundtable by an observation that I hope we share around this table and in this room. We experience an extraordinary period in terms of therapeutic innovation. We heal better, we treat better, and we offer treatments where there was none before. The quality of treatment available has increased considerably. And so for more and more diseases, we have treatments today. If you take the example of cancer, and we'll get back to it, 30 years ago, the survival rate was not 25%. It doubled, 50%, more than 50% healing rate. Thanks to scientific progress, thanks to genomics, we target better, we heal better. We have the emergence of personalized treatments. If we look at in rare diseases, there's an explosion of treatment now. The European Agency for Drugs has put 200 molecules, has authorized 200 molecules to the market. And if we look at the pipeline working on this kind of treatment, we have 500 drugs under development, and it's fantastic. But it can only happen if there's a market. Between innovation and the market, there's the assessment. The assessment, what is it? It's safety, it's quality, it's efficiency compared to existing treatments, and these elements that we try to cover in this roundtable. And I want to go back on what is the fundamental assessment. There's a methodology issue. How do we assess? That's fundamental. What's behind is the risk acceptance. What is this degree of risk acceptance? It's a very philosophical issue. It changes through time. We've seen it during COVID-19. And evidently, the risk, there are several elements. There's the patient risk. There's also the financial risk. At what cost do we pay? At what price for what result? And so in the past years, and this year in particular, has been prolific. The Born mission, we trained the doctrine at the HAS, revision of early access, and the health plan. We have a lot of propositions, and we're going to try to make it clearer. And I wanted to start with a question. Do we have to improve the assessment of drugs? Very briefly. Thank you for this question. Hello to all of you. Do we have to improve the assessment? So see if it functions, and if there are any things to improve. Assessment of drug assessment, it is multifactorial. When you have market authorization, and after, in what we call. So I'm going to go look at market authorization, and at the European level, the European agency is a coordination agency that rests on the expertise and the mobilization of every national health authority, including ANSM. And we've seen it for 10 years now, 15 years now. There's been a major evolution on the products, the market, the products that get market authorization, innovation, breakthrough innovations, and as the director, and I want breakthrough innovation every day, by definition. So it's easy. I don't talk money at the issue. It's much easier for me in this respect. And so with innovation, we're not on blockbuster, we're on personalized medicine. At the European agency level, we had to adapt in terms of guidelines to meet these challenges. with always the principle, what guides us is this cost, this risk-benefit equation, according to the situations, according to the target population, and according to the criticity and the acuteness of the disease. And so to allow access to innovation in conditions that are safest for the patient at any time. And we'll get back to this topic, to the preliminary elements. We'll get back to it, yes. Do we have to improve assessment of drug assessment? Of course, is the answer. I'm fortunate to have a lab that innovates a lot and is very concerned about assessment. Last year, we launched 10 new products. This year, it's 7. Before the reform of early access, we have 9 early access, and the assessment is also the medical economic assessment. It's 20% of the CSP Commission. We can see that assessment works. If we put 10 products on the market, that means that we made them evolve. Does it also mean that it's perfect and that there's no issues? No. The subjects and the experience that we have, we observe that, and I think we'll get back to it, a third of the products that are assessed at the European level that don't make it to the French market. If you look at derogatory access or early access, which is very virtuous, we'll get to that in the debate. We see simplification possibilities, but there are situations where we have a dead ends, and we need to work around that, and that's the topic of the day. This assessment has to adapt to new practices, to new innovations, treatments, oncology treatment for smaller populations also. And also our experience in my company, we regret that the place of the clinicians through the contribution of scholarly institutions is not taken into account in the assessment. Medical economy, we spend a lot of time and we give great care to do this job. And in reality, I'm not sure that economical medical assessment is not taken into account. And there's also an evolution that's going to be necessary because there's a European project of harmonization that we follow closely with the joint legal assessment that's going to arrive in January 2025, that's tomorrow. That can really reshuffle the cards, and we try to follow it closely with the HAS. And we'd like to collaborate on this issue on how these two systems are going to coexist. Thank you. I would change the title. We have to continue to make evolution assessment evolve. If you look at where we are at now, Christelle was saying this is first European assessment. What happens on the French market? Half. There's no issues in good terms, and there's no issue. We made great progress in the past years, which is early access, precocious access. On 100 molecules, it's 17 today. And it's a real asset in France. It's really an attractive point. It's a small number of patients, 50,000 patients on 23 million patients treated every day, and we have to make, by learning, after 2 years of experimentation, we see a lot of dead ends and issues with access. And there's propositions to unlock the situation. And what we call the third remaining that doesn't get to French market when it's available in the European markets. No, that doesn't mean that 1/3 doesn't have access. We have to look in detail, look at the balance, assess clinical assessment, methodological assessment. The data are not at the French standard. Maybe we're blocked on the price issue. On these 3 issues, we have to work together, and we owe it to the patient and to our citizens. Lionel, he listened patiently. It just turns out, and I guarantee that we didn't do it on purpose, that this morning in Les Echos, there's an op-ed on innovation access. No, France is not lagging behind. France is not lagging behind. And you really drew up the adrenaline here. So there's a lot of issues. Do we have to improve? I would say we have to adapt assessment to new pathologies, new diseases, and rare disease that have a very specific situations, looking at the numbers of people concerned. We have to look at other methods, other methodologies, knowing that we function on a criteria is scientific rigor and the gold standard of randomized studies. We won't go back on this, but we imagine that there are situations that when we want comparison issues, there's other types of comparisons and indirect comparisons. That was approached. Maybe I'll get back on the third of drugs not available. No, let's get there. Thierry, the global system is as it is. I was expecting this kind of remark. So I wanted to get deeper into the issue. And on this third of drugs, so they have a European market authorization, and they're not accessible on the French market. There are two-thirds to explain the third. One-third is because you're negotiating the price. We agree. It's purchasing issues, sourcing issues. One-third is because their medical services that was rendered is insufficient. And so let's not neglect that. That's the other third. Price negotiation, that's this third. And then there's third, which is at the same level, that cannot be explained by an issue of assessment. So we should keep in mind that it's another reason the work of assessment is that leads to these delays on market authorization. And you can find yourself in this last third, make the choice yourself as an industrial, not to put it on the market for your own reasons, because you can consider that the price offered doesn't suit you, and so I would like us to keep in mind that this third of drugs rests mostly on the drug. It's a time issue and political decision. Before you answer, Thierry, I think you want to answer back. Christelle, I want to get to you on the conditional market authorization. In what way does it impact assessment? I would like to go chronologically, and then we'll look at funding later, because it's also a contentious issue. So conditional market authorization, how does it impact assessment? And where are we in France compared to European countries? Maybe we center the issue here on the objective, the major objective for the European medical drug agency, and look at the benefit for the patient. Why are we going to go through for a market authorization, a conditional market authorization in France? When we define collectively at the European level, but also at the national level, that there's an interest for the patient. We have limited data. Nevertheless, if we don't mobilize to give access, there's a lack of loss of opportunity for the patient, and that's a major problem. When you're in a conditional market authorization, you have data that is not sufficient to give a full market authorization, and so you make a bet. You make a bet, collective bet. Both the industrials and the public authorities, and we say, let's go there, and there's a presumption. We don't have sufficient data, but we have to go further, and this bet has to be translated at every level. At each level, when two players take a bet, there's uncertainty and a risk, but necessarily what ensues in terms of price and evaluation has to be translated. We don't have all the data, and we're not 100% sure. Nevertheless, we have sufficient elements to accompany this access. And so everyone has to, take their own path while answering these demands. So we have conditional market authorization at European level. They've been there for a long time. It's not new. It's more present today regarding the innovation and the pathologies for which they're destined to, with small series, but they've been existing for a long time. And something that is important, but it's a bet. And every player, every actor involved in this bet, every player has to be able to have an attitude that is balanced and reserved regarding what they request after. So now we're looking at the industrials. Everybody is involved. Christophe, you're an expert at HBMS in precocious access. It's a procedure that we like because we have a portfolio that is well suited to it, with a lot of conditional market authorization. So there are 50% of our portfolio that go through this mechanism. 30,000 patients that were treated for 10 years with the former mechanism, and 2,300 since the reform. So this reform is a great move forward for the patient, and we really need to find solutions to make attractive this mechanism. Before the reform, 40% of industrials didn't want to go there anymore. And so we were able, in our statistics, show that there are 2 times more patients that benefited from our early access in the same time frame than compared to the previous mechanism. And so patient is key, is at the center. The balance is positive because combining responsibilities of ANSM and the High Health Authority, the mobilization of the HAS is very important. And the 2 agencies were coordinated and involved. And that was an expectation of the industrials, which criteria, eligibility criteria that are clear from the industrials, and a time to access time that's improved. 300 days of access thanks to early access. Is the system perfect? No. There are improvements possible. If you look at the bureaucratic weights, there's a dialogue we engage with technical teams of the HAS. I'll give you an example. We have had the opportunity to register a product in the framework of early access in AP1, and then we went to AP2, then it was renewed, and then a modification of the fields of indication of prescription of the drug. And so it's been a lot of work for us, and also people at the HAS, and we were mostly on the same data. That can be improved. There's a debate with the density of the collection of data in real time, and we have difficulty to have sufficient data in terms of quantity and quality. That's another issue. And so we have this debate in the interface committee with the HAS and the use of this data. And so after, we're going to talk about the trains that get on time. This mechanism works, but when we look, there are 138 early access that have been granted for a year. We're far from the molecules that are validated in the pharmacopea. And so we have exceptional results for the most innovating products. We have 80% of early access that are granted that get to market authorization of degree 1 and 2. So the presumed innovation is confirmed by the assessment. What is interesting is the 20% that are sanctioned by an ASMR 5. The doctrine at the HAS cannot evolve. We should carry out a study, and we haven't done it yet, of how many products in the 20% are in a situation of immaturity, of data immaturity. And we should carry out this study. We haven't done it yet. In reality, I've been concerned by a product that arrived with early access, so an AP2, that was sanctioned by ASMR 5. And we had conditional data. And I knew that I had a phase 3 coming, and that's the bet I made that would allow to change the level of ASMR. But we tinkered with that, because the reality of ASMR 5, that means that you have... And so access to the patient is finished, because they're very expensive, and so the state cannot fund that on its own funds. And so we decided to withdraw the product. We made a different choice. We looked for a dialogue with the funder to keep early access artificially on the market in conditions that were not acceptable financially. I did it because I knew that my clinical studies were going to arrive in a reasonable term. allowing for reassessment to get a reimbursement with the Economical Committee for health products. And so we found a solution here, but it was tinkering. We need industrial solutions for these 20% of APE sanctioned by ASMR 5 because data is immature, and there's a track that can be used. That's ASMR, that's not 5, with uncertain added value. So I would like to turn to you, Lionel, change of doctrine. What are the effects? What have we changed? First, how do we meet this challenge, and what can we expect from it? And should we go further? I took my function. I got into the job end of April, and this doctrine was changed in February. I'm not at the origin, but I agree with it. So the Committee on Transparency did something, and it's the randomized studies are the base of every study for the demonstrations, and the studies need a comparison and open the door to indirect comparisons compared to real-life data. So what is the result? A few weeks ago, the ACT, for one specific drug, anti-cancer drug, went from ASMR 5, was downgraded to 4, based on an indirect comparison. So the group, as it was matched, guaranteed scientifically the quality of this matching and allowed to conclude on the efficiency of the product compared to the comparator, and could pass it from ASMR 5 to 4. And it's very important. The ACT showed that it was able to do it. And absolutely, we had to keep total scientific rigor in the comparison, and it's important for industrials that it's not just a few lines in a doctrine, but we can carry it out, we can implement it, and this methodology meets this level of demand. And so we'll get to ASMR 5 of products that have early access. Do we do it now or later?
J'aimerais me tourner vers vous, Thierry.
To you, Thierry.
Le PLFSS 2024,
so
Alors, il y a un constat qui est partagé, je crois, c'est qu'en effet,
so the funding law, the project, the bill on the funding of the health system. So data is immature, and we have a dead end with the ASMR 5, and encourages some, in my lab including, not to go to take this track because it has public European impact and impacts its product strategy. And we all said to ourselves, we need to do something. You made offers. The Innovation Agency made some suggestions. And the PLFSS made some suggestions, and we have to unlock the situation. So sorry to awaken the room here, but the offer that is in the funding law proposal is going to bring to a halt this early access because it doesn't incentivize the labs. And so we wanted to add another layer and layers with new derogatory access to something that's already derogatory when we have offers that are very simple on the table. And an offer that's from the Innovation Agency in Health that said we have to leave the HAS judge. As you said, Lionel, based on scientific and the commitment of the industrial when you have clinical trials to give data in a reasonable time frame. It cannot last forever. And once we did that, we continue early access. It's very easy to implement, and we're all aligned. I hope common sense will take over, and we're all mobilized to ensure that this great progress that we made in terms of evolution of the assessment, we don't undermine it before getting to the finish line. So we have some time before this funding bill on Social Security is voted to negotiate that. So who disagrees with that? So we all agree. How do you perceive that? Very simply, the HAS, and Christelle can say the same thing. We didn't draft this funding bill. It's not our role. At the HAS, we consider that there are two distinct ASMR 5 because it's been demonstrated that there's no clear improvement. And for this, we don't have tools to demonstrate that because we expect data. And it seems to us indispensable that we make this distinction somewhere in the text, in the bill. And so the suggestions in the way it's drafted, how to call it with other mechanisms, it's a discussion that between industrials and the ministries on the preparation of this funding bill. And what we push forward for the suggestions is to distinct clearly those two types of ASMR. Okay, it's clear. Just to add on this, to get back to science, because it's important. Typically, on this issue of ASMR, absence, lack of or incomplete data, where we have immature data, and what part of uncertainty do we accept, and the clinician accepts, and the patient accepts? Because that's the issue. That's what it means. Immature, incomplete data, or data that's not robust enough, and that's it. How much time do we accept it? We have it in the case of early access. Do we accept it for several years? There's the issue of new, more mature data, and the calendar of more mature data is indispensable, and it's uncertainty that is borne by the clinician and the patient. This point is very important. We completely agree, and there needs clear commitment with clinical tests and when the data will be available, so it doesn't remain an open book. So to call this ASMR5, because it's non-quantifiable at the moment, and I think we can easily have everybody agree to something very simple that would make this early access last a long term. I think this lasting element, the system that we put in place, the system would be set into a time frame based on scientific data. So there's a solution that we can find. Let's work with the drafters of the funding bill to find an easy exit, and we have a few days left. Let's mobilize. So there's a track we can follow. And that you mentioned what's troubling to us in the funding bill is the over-financial regulation. Let's not forget that a few years ago we reformed the mechanism in this dimension because it was disincentivizing. With 30 million per year per patient, many industrials didn't want to go there. Wanting to regulate, this is what's suggested after assessment, it would be a drama, it would be dramatic. With the 9 early access that I was be part of, I wouldn't go there tomorrow. If I know in case of uncertain data, I'm going to be over-regulated, because we had a level of reimbursement that's confiscatory. And so the funding bill is very secure, and I invite to collect sums with the economical community. I know what I owe the state from March, April. Were not collected for this year or the year after. So come to get those sums. I have the cash flow, but financially, in terms of activity, there's very little attractiveness here. And let's add problems to the problems. We're on this early access where data is immature. We have to wait to quantify the ASMR, and let's treat it in the funding bill. Let's not take advantage to add financial regulation that nobody asked for. We agree. There's this topic that you mentioned, which is the famous third. I don't have the same reading. What does it mean? In the famous third, there are some molecules for which the industrial doesn't go there because the weight of methodology of phase 3 randomized trials regarding the clinical weight is heavier in France than the European assessment. And we have to work together. There's no methodology. We can talk about risk-benefit assessment. In certain cases, we see it in populations in oncology, on targets that are very specialized with small populations, where it's complicated to have clinical trials and to recruit a wide array of patients and a big pool of patients, and the doctrine is covered. We have to continue working together and work together on a precise, specific example on how we can improve the system. And there's a margin of progression and improvement, and working together, we'll find solutions. Just answering to Thierry. We don't disagree. The third, It's you, the industrials, who made the choice for those products not to put them on the market. And it's not a direct consequence of the assessment. It's indirect because it can be SMR5 or other requests. It's a consequence of the doctrine. I'm not convinced that it's a consequence of the doctrine. My message is to say, when we say to our citizens, there are 20% of products that have market authorization at the European level that is not available in our market. We have to say why. And I explained to you the three situations. They're rather clear. The price is being negotiating. You wait. Okay, fine. That's choice. There are insufficient ASMR. And the third part, it's in your hands. That's what I'm saying. It's into your hands. Regarding the way in which it's going to be assessed. But it's in your hands. It's kind of the chicken and the egg. I would like to talk about patients because we don't have them here, and we're in a passionate debate, very technical. How do we explain these situations to patients? How as an industrial do you work, and an institutional representative, how do you work with the patients? There's one regret we have is the voice of the patients is not sufficiently heard in the process, in the assessment process. I would say that they're present, there are two at the ACT. To know our files, we saw the contribution of patients not well considered or sufficiently considered in our methodological debates, and it's something we should regret. And I would like to hear Lionel giving feedback on his experience. He's been the head of the industry for a little time now, on taking into account the contribution of patients in this mechanism. The patients are very mobilized when they are in these dead-end situations, and thanks to them that we make things move. But they intervene in crisis situation. What would be interesting is to have their voice heard during assessment around at the ACT table. I'm going to be unambiguous here. Before being appointed, same thing for Christelle, in this function that we are audited by the Parliament. We have a hearing in front of the Parliament, and I had announced that I wished to reinforce the weight of patients and users and experts in humanities too. Something that we didn't talk about here. My determination is total, is complete. We're not going to get through the whole history. There's been users in non-regulatory commissions, so not at the ACT. 2015, there's been a change in the regulation that authorize users' representatives, and there's two now sitting. If you look in 2008, the HAS produced a guideline on cooperation with users, and I asked how it went this year. There's been dark contributions from patients' associations, that's reality, hearings from patient associations when it's possible. Hard to say that they're not listened to. My wish is that they're completely heard. It's one of the elements of the file. In other situations, it's indisputable. I've heard situations where the weight of the association could tilt the balance on one side or the other. The association they're not always on the side of the product. Beware. That is qualified as innovating. According to say that the HAS, nothing that is new is necessarily an innovation. So I agree with you. We should listen to patients more. Earlier, Christelle, you mentioned that assessment is always an issue of risk-taking. Who takes the risk? And how do we move forward in partnership to an agreement? Since we haven't covered this perspective yet, we don't have the CPS with us this morning, we can still talk about it. At what point are we? How far are we on this issue of price setting? There are new models. Are we going to be able to, in the context in which we are, with this innovation, how are we going to be able to face this issue of drug reimbursements? So we open here a long debate, and there's a real issue. In the famous third that doesn't have access, a third is an issue, is a price issue. we could say that certain criteria in the assessment impact the price. We could talk about it at length. There's something in front of us. We're in a system in France that is with annual budgets, and we think the disease stops on December 31st, and it may eventually starts again on January 1st. In real life, that's not the case. It lasts through time, and certain treatments have cycle treatments that for long-term benefits. And so we opened the debate on performance contracts. We had at the beginning some experiments that were not successful because complex, and Christelle would talk better about this. We reopened the debate on this, and the conclusion of the Born mission, how are we going to fund in the long term treatments in which benefits for society is well beyond the cost of the injection. And so we have to rethink about these treatments, and we have performance contracts. If we want it to work, we need the number of performance criteria is simple and easy to follow. If we open a complex system, we're going to make the system fail. And this is one of the means to fund breakthrough innovations. And here, as a company working on medication and drugs, we're voluntary to talk, dialogue, and build together for a system that works in the interest of the patients. Concretely, how would it work? And if we have to reimburse, we set a price, we reimburse after. What you mentioned, Antoine, on risk sharing. We pay for some molecules to pay for performance is not uninteresting. And I regret that the secretary of the CEPS is not here because they have great experience in that. They signed a number of performance contracts for many years. It's 30 contracts that they signed. So, I'm going to paraphrase. I don't remember that they were particularly satisfied with these contracts, maybe one or two, and so the audit court held that as a success. And so we entered negotiation with the committee that was win-win. We were co-committed on a population size and a criteria that was defining the efficiency of the products. It's not so obvious because in the real life, you're not into like in a clinical mechanism, and we have to agree on how we're going to collect the data. And so what was virtuous is that in reality, so much on the size of the population and the criteria, nature criteria, and the quality of data, we were there. We met the criteria. And so that's why it's virtuous, this contract for performance, but it's hard to get there, to agree on an assessment criteria that's common, that's shared. So I'm seduced by this system of paying for performance. It's a risk-sharing model. It's interesting when you're not able to measure the impact immediately, and I think that we're going to have to learn by doing. And so we're trying to get back into the adventure, and this is what we're trying to do at our lab. Do we have data in France between the market authorization at the European level and access to patient for 150, 500 days? Yes. So with this kind of system, if you talk to me, there's something very, in terms of terms, that there's been a great improvement at the HES and an overhaul of the process with means that are set up. And honestly, thank you. It's longer at the CEPS. There's a scandal. Is the time to publish in the official publication. And we take 3 to 6 months. You just have to sign a paper and publish it. It costs nothing. It's just improve administrative process to get it into published officially. And we win 120 days. What are we waiting for? We talk about simplification. Today, in our companies, when we have a document to sign by 10 people in 5 parts in the world, we do a workflow, it's done in the day. Today, we have, in terms of access to market, we have 3 months to wasted. So let's go there. We have 5 minutes left. I would like to go around the table once more and finish with you, Lionel. If there's one thing that we need to improve on the assessment in France, what would it be? What is the priority? continue to be agile and adapt in function of the circumstances and be transparent. That's what was said earlier on the difficulty of collecting data with professionals, health professionals. We have to be transparent on the whole line. At the industrial level, on what we know, what we don't know, what we know on this product that will get us to offer this innovation, and what we don't know, and what we should have as data to guarantee that it will be lasting or not. And around the table, we haven't heard the situation when we take a bet, at some point we realize that that's not a good bet. And so we stop. And that's obviously something important. I'm still always very optimistic on the basis that we're going to be able to acquire data that will allow to make the product lasting. But in some cases situations where it's not the case. So it's really on this point, to be transparent with health professionals, with patients on what is the promise? Because we make a promise when we have derogatory access, authorization, and access to innovation with immature data. We make a promise, and do we keep this promise? And I put on my hat of authority and police. It's indispensable for the safety of patients. We didn't talk too much about the word patient has not been mentioned too much, but it's a major point. Let's not promise wonders to people when it's not the case, and to be balanced, and that's fundamental. On what we could, in one word, improve, the list is long, but we have interface committees, so I'm not going to get back to technical issues on early access and taking into account the clinical elements. I see an opportunity. Is the European assessment. We didn't talk about it too much. It's going to be another topic of discussion next year, because we're going to implement the mechanism. I have one worry, which is the lengthening of the terms, and I have an opportunity of a compromise of the doctrine with other European practices, and the possibility not to reassess what's been done at the ECMR in terms of benefit and risks, and what will be in the joint mutual assessment in the therapeutic interest that we can develop. So we have really a demand to collaborate with the services of the HAS to have coexist those two processes. So in 2025, it will only be the registering in oncology that will be possible. So they're going to be managed in the standard mechanism. So it's an evolution that we have to see as a benefit for the patient on terms of access. And some do very well at other levels, at the European level. So that's a point of attention for in the future. I'm very down to earth. And a round table, we get out. What do we do out of the round table? There's two things we should do. One is on ASMR non-quantifiable. Let's have a funding bill that's practical, not complex, that allows this French innovation of early access to be lasting with the controls necessary. We'll all agree. The second thing, we really have this issue of official publication. And if we made those two innovations next year, we wouldn't have wasted our time tomorrow. So let's take an appointment for that. So I'm only at the level of the HAS, so the official publishing is not my case. So we have early consultations that I wouldn't talk about it, but that's sufficient with the industrials. And we can talk about the methodology prior and before examination of these files. And that can be done in an anticipated fashion. And there's something that there's a possibility. And so I'm not going to talk about the European level. There's the Regulation 21 that kicks in 2025 with many changes, notable changes. But if the instruction is going to be inter-European, the appraisal is going to remain at the state level. So we talked at the European level about the instruction file. But we won't do together the joint legal assessment, not now.
Très bien, merci à tous.
Thanks to all of you.